9 weeks until Election Day and still plenty of presidential attention on Michigan. Third-party candidates set to visit Detroit next week. And did we get a preview of what debates will look like between Clinton and Trump? Also coming up, the first week of school and the potential political showdown over closing poor-performing schools in the new Detroit district. Plus, the controversial LGBTQ guidelines for Michigan schools are back up for a vote. And who had a good week or a bad one? We have a full show for you. Stephen and Nolan are here, so stay put. My Week starts right now.
Did you know Roush Enterprises was selected by Google to assemble a test fleet of 100 prototype self-driving cars in 2015? It also produced the new Domino's delivery cars. And speaking of Domino's, Domino's sells well over 2 million pizzas per day around the world, and half of their sales are digital. These are just some of the ways Michigan's pioneers started out as small companies with big ideas.
We are business leaders for Michigan. We are committed to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. Funding is also provided by Delta.
Welcome to My Week. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Christy McDonald. Our My Week contributors, Stephen Henderson and Nolan Finley, are here. Guys, you know, every time you have a first week after Labor Day, it feels like it's back to school, back to normal, back to, you know, forget the summer vacations, right? We're all
right.
back in
And
our
in a
normal
political
spots.
year, it's into the home stretch, right? This is when the candidates really start to make their case to the general election audience, and we will see a lot more ads, I suspect, over the next month or so.
Do you think we're going to? Do you think we're going to see a lot of ads? Do you think Trump's
Well,
going to
both
spend a lot?
candidates have ads up now, don't they?
Both candidates have ads up now. We won't see as many in Michigan, perhaps, as they will in Ohio and some of the other states that are truly in play. But Michigan's getting a surprising amount of attention, given that it's, you know, it is really not a swing state or battleground state in my mind, and yet the candidates keep showing up here.
Hey, you know, there's a lot to talk about this week. So let's get started with some politics. This week launches the big push towards Election Day, as Stephen said, or as I saw in a great headline, the beginning of the end. This has been a long election cycle. Both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump have their fair share of headlines. A new poll puts them closer. Their joint appearance this week talking foreign policy sets them apart from each other and could give us an idea of the significance of upcoming debates. Plus, how the third party plays into this race. Libertarian Gary Johnson is speaking to the Detroit Econ Club next week. So there's really a lot to talk to here. But let's get started with the fact that they both appeared in this candidates forum and what they called a commander-in-chief forum last night on NBC, and last night being Wednesday, if you guys see our show when we broadcast another time. What did you make of that, Nolan?
Well,
they each had 30 minutes.
Yeah, and to me, it simply confirmed what you know, what I've thought for the last several months since the nominations were secured, that we've got two very flawed candidates running for president. And I saw nothing last night that that would change my mind on that. Trump was all over the damn place in terms of firing generals here and praising Putin there. Clinton was extraordinarily defensive. I mean, she really was at her most unpleasant, I thought. And I don't see how it clarified the race at all for those people who are sitting out there and saying, gosh, I don't like either one of these candidates, and I don't know what to do. I don't think they walked away saying, wow, this one knocked me dead.
I gotta ask you about the word unpleasant. What made you use that word with Hillary Clinton?
She just didn't seem like she's having much fun out there. I mean, again, it was attack, attack, attack. And if you look at what's been happening in the polls in over the last couple months, Donald Trump has stayed at 39-40. The only number that's changed is her number. She goes up and she goes down. He doesn't move anywhere. I don't know what the point is continuing to make your whole campaign about Donald Trump. He's not going anywhere. He's not going up in these polls. She needs to make the case for her candidate. She needs to appear confident, competent, and lose this obsession with Donald Trump. She needs to win this race herself.
Well,
what did you think about the forum last
She
night?
clearly was competent. I mean, there was no question that the answers that she gave, her command of the material. I mean, you're not talking about an even match here at all. And there continues to be this narrative that says, well, these are two flawed candidates.
Well, they are.
Well, all candidates are flawed, A.
Not to
B,
this extent.
Well, B, Donald Trump's flaws are so much more garish, so much more dangerous, so much more of a threat to the whole idea of the presidency. He's talking about essentially being elected king or dictator or something. She's talking about being elected president, and you can disagree with the way she might make decisions or policies she might embrace, but she knows what she's talking about. She knows what she's doing. And this idea of unpleasant, let's talk about that a second. This is a thing that gets heaped on female candidates all the time. Why don't you smile more? What does that mean? What's she supposed to be smiling about?
I don't care if she smiles more or not, Steve. She comes off as attack, attack, attack. That's not pleasant in a man or a woman. And she's not going to be able to hide behind her skirts
for a year
in
and a
this
half.
campaign. Well, Donald, who takes him seriously, Steve? You talked about her coming up there and presenting her resume and appearing competent. And yet over the last couple of weeks, we've seen, you say Donald Trump wants to be a king. I don't disagree with you, but she operates like one, destroying evidence that was subpoenaed by Congress, knowingly destroying evidence. That's serious stuff.
If she had done that, she'd be under indictment.
She did it. You only have to look at the FBI report. I mean, Steve, that's proven.
What they said was that what she did was reckless. That's not the same as what you're talking about.
Steve, she destroyed those emails after they were subpoenaed for Congress. That's there. That's on the record.
All right,
that's not conjecture.
I want to go back to looking at what this forum was last night, and it brought out a lot about the email. She had to talk about that. But do you think that it gives us a sense of what some of these debates are going to be like coming in the fall, and how valuable or how not valuable the debates are going to be in terms of getting substance out?
She's got to stop indulging the false equivalent of Republicans who are disappointed with the outcome of their primaries, which got a nut job elected to represent them in the fall, and so now they're kicking mud all over her to say, well, there's no difference. There is a huge difference, and she's got to start, I think, more proactively making that case. I think where Nolan's right is she's got to make her case to the American people about who she is, what she's done. I mean, this is one of the most accomplished public officials in the history of this country. You don't get that sense from the things that she's saying. She has to focus much more on that and stop sort of indulging this idea that the flaws that Donald Trump has, which are huge character flaws, things that would disqualify him from polite company, let alone public office, are anything close to the things that she's done or been accused of, most of which, of course, are not true.
But she spends all of her time talking about Donald Trump. And
exactly.
So at some point, one of these candidates needs to move to the middle, because the middle it doesn't have a candidate in this race. She's still hanging out there on the far left fringes as if she's running against Bernie Sanders still. And the middle of America is looking for a place, a candidate they can be comfortable with. And right now, they're not comfortable with either one of these candidates.
So let's talk about the debate, though, Nolan, and let me ask you this. Does Donald Trump need to take these next debates, when they start, and give more detail to what he's talking about in terms of his policy plans or his foreign policy plans?
I think that's possible.
You don't think that's possible for him to give any more detail, or you don't think a debate will be able to bring that out?
And we were watching, Steve and I were watching the Jerry Springer show in the green room before we come out.
We have a lot of highbrow watching here. Yeah.
You were. It was, what was the subject today?
Twin lesbian something.
Twin lesbian something, I know. But, it's going to be like that. You saw the Republican debates, and some very competent candidates, very intelligent candidates got drawn into this sort of mud free-for-all, this, WWE mess. And I expect that's what you're going to see. Donald Trump doesn't have any policy ideas, for God's. I mean, he just doesn't. And if she continues to sort of follow him down and spend all her time pounding on Donald Trump, she's going to look as bad as Jeb Bush did, as bad as Marco Rubio did, and other candidates who should have came off a lot better in that primary season.
It's interesting. You're reading a little bit in kind of the run-up to some of the debate and taking a look at what happened on Wednesday night. Matt Lauer got a little bit of heat for how he moderated, or maybe how he did not moderate. And Chris Wallace is going to be one of the moderators, and he said it is not his job to be the fact checker when he's up there on stage. And I wanted to get your opinion on, do you think, as a moderator of the debate, that they should be the fact checker?
That's a really hard thing to ask of the moderator. And I'm not giving Matt Lauer a pass, but you are there to ask questions, to keep the thing moving, to make sure both candidates
So then, is it for the other candidate then to fact check the person that they're running against?
Primarily, yes, it is. But Donald Trump, of course, is an anomalous candidate. I mean, we've never seen anybody who says the things that he says, or who repeats lies as frequently as he does, or tells as many lies as he does. And so I think that does recast the role of moderator a little bit. The responsibility becomes pointing out that the things that he's saying just aren't so. And that's really hard to do because, again, you've got all of these other tasks that are in front of you, and you have the pressure of time on top of it. But
as a moderator, you're not there to debate the candidate. You're not there to correct the candidate. And if you try to do fact checking on the fly, it's a risky endeavor, as we've seen with Candy Crawley during the Obama Mitt Romney debate, where she played fact checker and was wrong, and had played an influential role in that debate because she was wrong. I mean, it's too risky an endeavor. You're there to ask the questions, ask tough follow-up. You're not there to interject yourself in the debate.
It's also sort of pointing out a limitation of the debate format. It doesn't really allow for the kind of back and forth or discussion that would sort of air some of these things as falsehoods. But I do think that Donald Trump presents this sort of new challenge to people in the way that these are framed, because so much of what he's saying is predicated on falsehood. I mean, major portions of what he believes or what he says he wants to do.
And there's people whose role that is to fact check, and that's the other campaign. That's a fair and objective media. It is not the role.
That can keep newsrooms busy, though, for hours as well. And I do think, though, in watching him and watching how he interacts, even with interviewers and even in a moderation sense, he is. It's so hard to. It's easy to go down the rabbit hole with him because you keep trying to come back to something. I've seen this happen a couple times. One more thing before we leave the political landscape here, and talking a little bit about Michigan, a third-party candidates coming here and speaking to the Econ Club. I mean, you still have this sense that these numbers can shift a little bit. And who does that hurt mostly? Does that hurt Hillary Clinton, or does that hurt Donald Trump? Third-party candidacy.
Depends on which third-party candidate you're talking about. You have two here, one on the far right, or maybe not. That's probably not where libertarians would think of themselves. No. But certainly on the right, and one on the pretty far left. And they're drawing equally, I think, from the pools of Republicans and Democrats who are just saying, hey, I just really don't like my party's candidate this time. And so in the end, it could end up being a wash. I think if you had one candidate who was on one side who had the amount that both of those candidates had, maybe, I don't know.
Together they're drawing about 15-16%.
Yeah.
And what I would have made the assumption that Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate, would draw votes from Trump, from conservatives who say, and Republicans say, God, I just can't do it. I can't vote for Trump. But if you look at these polls, when all four candidates are on the ballot, Trump's number again stays about the same, and it's Hillary's number that moves. I mean, Trump's number is not moving in these polls.
He's not doing anything to attract new voters,
and he's not losing voters.
And he's not losing voters,
and which is why I still think, why keep making this campaign about Donald Trump?
All right, well, let's move on now to a quick look at Detroit Public Schools and the potential for the State Attorney General to get involved in paving the way to shutting down poor-performing schools in the newly created district. We talked about a legal opinion last week that the governor's office accepted that said schools in the new Detroit Public Schools community district could not be shut down for the next 3 years due to poor performance by the State Reform Office. Well, one Republican leader, Senate Majority Leader Alan Meekhoff, said he doesn't agree, and he's considering all the options, and one of them would be getting Bill Schuette involved to give a legal opinion here. Are we kind of messing the waters? Stephen, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I mean, I think this whole argument is miscast in the sense of, again, and I said this last week, I think, on the show, or maybe 2 weeks ago, this idea that the language that we use about schools and kids and teachers and performance, that, hey, let's shut down a school when it's not doing well, and there is a sub-narrative there that's punitive towards teachers, it's punitive toward Detroit, the idea that somehow Detroiters can't run their own schools. I think we would do well to change that narrative to talk about, okay, well, if a school is performing poorly, if it's failing over a long period of time, what do we do to turn it around? And maybe that's largely semantic. because you can't shut down that, there are entire areas of the city that don't have any schools or have one. How are you going to shut the one school down if it's bad? The question is, how do you create a good school or more good schools in those areas? And we're not talking about that, I think, for specific reasons, because people in Lansing are not interested in doing that. That is the hard work of fixing Detroit, figuring out how to create quality options for people, as opposed to punishing teachers or administrators or Detroiters for schools that they see as insufficient.
At this point, it's not about failing or not failing. You've got 40,000 excess seats in Detroit. If those aren't quickly, if that excess capacity isn't quickly taken out, if the infrastructure isn't right-sized to meet the actual student population, in 3 years, it's not going to matter, because they're going to be out of money again. I mean, that was the case people made when they were arguing for the Education Commission, that they would orderly close schools, because if you don't close schools, the cost of operating this system is going to break its back again. I don't know how the governor can, in good conscience, say, we're not going to do anything about this infrastructure for 3 years. I mean, he'll be gone by then, but this place will be dead flat broke in 3 years if it has to operate that many schools.
It's 40,000 excess capacity, but entire areas of the city that have no school. So it's a twin problem. You have too many seats in the wrong places.
So you need to move things around, but you absolutely have to trim capacity. Yeah. That's almost an extra seat for every student.
Well, two things that also stuck out for me as well would be the quote that Lansing has Detroit fatigue in terms of going back in the legislation and fixing that and saying, yes, these schools can perhaps be touched within 3 years. And the other thing was, now you've just got another Bill Schuette v. Rick Snyder political situation here again, which is, again, I think makes for an interesting dynamic.
Well, if the governor needed a legal opinion, I mean, protocol would have said, you go to the Attorney General. And I thought that was curious that they went to Miller Canfield instead of Bill Schuette to look for an opinion.
I don't think Rick Steiner and Bill Schuette are talking very much these days.
Well, that was my point about 30 seconds ago. All right, turning to our other discussions involving education, the state school board will be taking up the LGBTQ policy that was very controversial last spring. They are guidelines of how schools should handle gay and transgendered students, protection, privacy issues, and parental involvement when it comes to meeting federal guidelines. And I think that was really interesting, because it was a note that Ingrid Jacques from your paper, from the Detroit News, wrote saying that this is going to be coming up again next week. And so I went in and I actually looked at the guidelines and how they have changed and read through them from last spring until now. And I think the one thing that people were looking at is really the parental involvement, and if parents should be spoken to when schools are dealing with how children want to be called and so forth. And I think when you look at it, and I would really encourage people to take a look at this, they have changed the wording a little bit, but not very much. Nolan, have you had a chance to take a look?
Yeah, they still left a huge loophole for not involving parents and not informing parents, and I think that's the fatal flaw of this. As I've said before on this show, you shouldn't lose your parental rights simply because your child is transgender. That's the time when a child needs his or her parents, and of course any child might be reluctant to tell their parents, but that reluctance shouldn't be translated into, oh, it's a dangerous environment for the kid. The parents need to be part of this process. And
it does have through this entire 8-page thing, it does keep repeating that parents are very important to the process, but they're going to take a student-centered approach, and then they did change this word, saying with the parents as well, except in situations where educators are aware that parental knowledge might threaten the student's safety and or welfare. Yeah. Is that fair?
Well, it's not just fair, it's super important. I mean, there are lots of cases, individual cases, where kids who are transgender end up being abused or kicked out by parents who are unable to deal with that. And I think the school has to be able to accommodate for that. I don't think you make all of the policy exclusively around that, and I don't think this does this. This says that parents should be involved, except in those cases.
But it doesn't specify how you determine whether it's just the student's word, whether they're going to do a home evaluation. It's too big a whole, I don't think it changes anything for the better.
And it says everything is looked at a case-by-case basis, and I guess when you look at this, these are guidelines. These are saying, schools, this is something for you to take a look at. This is not any kind of mandate of any sort.
That's right. I mean, you look, this is the board trying to deal with a pretty thorny issue, I think, in a progressive way, and that's really what the pushback is against it. Underneath this question about parents is really an anti-inclusion narrative that
I think that's
Do you think
unfair to
it's
parents.
an anti-inclusion?
Well, I'll ask you, you've got 3 young kids. If one of your kids went to school and decided to change their gender and you weren't told about it, how would you feel?
I wasn't told. You mean they would just go to the office and say?
That's which is what they can do now.
You know, I
mean,
don't,
it's about parents, and I think it's unfair to say it's about hatred or exclusion or whatever.
Well, we have
it's
examples
about
of that hatred.
It's
not
about
like I just pulled out of the air.
It's here, and I think when you say, yeah, it's guidelines. Well, the federal government issues these kind of guidelines all the time, and they become mandates because the funding's tied to them.
All right. Well, we'll see what the conversation is up in Lansing next week with this. And finally tonight, it was a pretty good week for many, and for others, not so much. So here we go. I decided to come up with a little bit of fun here at the end. It was a good week for it. It was a bad week for. You ready? All right. It was a good week for Little Caesars because they are breaking ground on their new world headquarters. Did you take a look at that this week? Shoveling some dirt, huh?
That's a big deal. And Smith Henchman and Grills, the old architecture firm that's done a lot of work in Detroit, is designing that. I didn't know that they were designing that building until I read about it this weekend. So that's
I know.
cool.
Did you take a look at that?
Woodward Avenue is transforming at such a rapid rate. You've got the M1 line, investment in property and new development all along that line, and it's not even open yet. I think 2 or 3 years from now, we're not going to recognize Woodward Avenue.
They're also now digging the median that the villages want to put into Woodward, so with trees and green, so that we don't have 9 lanes of concrete that separate the 2 sides of the street.
That's good. All right, well, here's the bad week. It was a bad week for Fox News because they had to pay out $20 million to Gretchen Carlson's sexual harassment claims, and Greta Van Susteren leaves. So what are our conservative viewers who love Fox News? I mean, they are a little bit in trouble there. Nolan, I'm going to let you take a crack at that one.
You know, they replaced Greta Van Susteren with Brett Hume.
Brett Hume?
Yeah, and to me they're the same person.
Does Fox recover from this? The culture of Fox?
I think it will. I mean, I don't think it offends any of their hardcore fans. It should offend everybody else. But of course, if you crap out at Fox News, you can go work for the Donald Trump campaign. So.
That's an interesting job road. All right, I got 2 more for you just to end on a fun note. Good week for the Wolverines. U of M named the top public university in America, according to QS World University Rankings. It's another insufferable bragging from Stephen Henderson.
I didn't bring it up. You did.
All right, and
they're already working on that Harbaugh statue.
That's right. That's right. And it's a bad week for iPhone users who like headphones because the new iPhone 7 will not have a headphone jack.
How's that going to work?
You have to buy wireless headphones.
Oh, they have to be
cordless.
wireless.
Yeah. So they'll just
Bluetooth.
The buds. Yeah, will just be Bluetooth.
That's okay.
What do you think about that?
That's okay. I mean, they're easier to lose when they're not stuck in your phone.
I was just going to say, and you got $100 I can borrow to buy a pair? I'm not quite sure how much they are, but
yeah,
I'm sure
I saw
they're not
that. I
cheap.
didn't
I'm sure
understand.
Apple's got some kind of plan for it.
I was like, well, what's the
why of it?
Huh?
Why
Just trying to be streamlined.
They're pushing us into the future, Nolan.
There you go, Nolan. We're dragging you with us. And that's going to do it for my week. Thanks so much for spending time with us. We appreciate it. Check us out during the week. Facebook, Twitter, @MiWeek. Thanks for supporting Detroit Public TV. For all of us here at Public Television, I'm Christy McDonald. We'll see you next time. Take care.